I cannot stay, Ada. I never could.
Then why did you come? Why did you come if you were always going to leave?
Because you were the only place that ever felt like home. Even rain needs somewhere to fall.
Then stay. Choose to stay.
Rain does not choose, Ada. Rain only falls, and then it goes.
There is a smell that comes before rain. Not the rain itself. Not the cold weight of water falling from a sky that has carried it too long. That smell that comes before, that particular sweetness that rises from dry earth the moment the clouds begin to think about opening. That scent that makes children run outside and old women close their eyes and remember things they thought they had forgotten. Adaeze knew that smell better than she knew anything else in the world. She had grown up in Enugu, in a house with a rusted zinc roof that sang when the rain came. Her mother used to say that Adaeze was born during the heaviest rainfall that Enugu had seen in 40 years, that the midwife had to wade through water to reach their door. And even as a newborn, she had not cried like other babies. She had simply opened her eyes, looked at the ceiling, and listened. Her mother said she was listening to the rain. Her mother was probably right. Adaeze grew into a woman who was quietly extraordinary, not loud about it, not the kind of woman who entered a room and demanded that the room rearrange itself around her. She was the kind of woman who sat in a corner at a gathering, and somehow by the end of the evening, everyone had found their way to her. She had that quality, that stillness that made people feel safe, like shelter, like a place you could say the true thing and not be judged for it. She was 31 years old and she worked as a secondary school literature teacher in Enugu. She lived alone in a 2-bedroom flat on Independence Layout. She had a small garden on her balcony where she grew tomatoes and scent leaf and one stubborn hibiscus that refused to bloom no matter what she did to it. She had 3 close friends. She made the best egusi soup in her family and everyone knew it and nobody argued about it. She was content, not happy in the way that shouts, happy in the way that settles. And then the rains came early that year, and with the rains came Tobena. She met him on a Tuesday in April at the bus stop on Ugui Road, holding her bag over her head with one hand and her novels with the other, watching her shoes absorb water and calculating how long she would take to dry them by morning. Around her, people ran and cursed and pressed themselves under every available overhang. She stood still. She had never seen the point of running from rain. You got wet either way. At least standing still, you could watch it. That was when she heard him laugh. Not at her. She would learn later that he was not the kind of man who laughed at people. He laughed with things. He was laughing at the rain itself, at the absurdity and the beauty of it, at the way it had descended without warning on a Tuesday afternoon and upended every plan anyone had made. He was standing 2 feet away from her, under absolutely nothing, no umbrella, no overhang, no bad held uselessly above, just standing in the full force of it with his face tilted slightly upward and his eyes closed, and that laugh coming out of him like something that had waited a long time to escape. He was soaked completely through. His dark shirt was plastered to his shoulders, water ran in rivers down his face, and he was laughing like a man who had just been handed the greatest gift of his life. Adaeze stared at him. He opened his eyes and caught her staring. He did not look embarrassed. He looked at her the way you look at someone you recognize but cannot immediately place, with that particular warmth of almost knowing. Tobena, the tall, soaked man at the bus stop, said, grinning, water dripping from his chin, "You are not running." Adaeze, the woman with the bag over her head, said, looking at him evenly, "Neither are you." Tobena, the tall, soaked man at the bus stop, said, spreading his arms wide, gesturing at the rain, "Why would I run from something this beautiful?" She looked at the rain. She looked at him. Something moved in her chest that she did not immediately have a name for. His name was Tobena Okafor. He was 35. He was a civil engineer who had spent the last 4 years working on water infrastructure projects across the country, dams, drainage systems, flood control. He had lived in Abuja, Port Harcourt, Calabar, and briefly in Kano. He had no permanent address, he carried a single bag everywhere he went, and he knew how to sleep in any condition, and he ate whatever was available without complaint. and he could fix almost anything with whatever was nearby. He told her all of this standing in the rain at the bus stop on a wee road, while both of them got thoroughly soaked and neither of them moved to stop it. By the time the rain eased, she had given him her number. She did not know why. She was not a woman who gave her number to strangers at bus stops, but something about him, that laugh, that ease, that complete and total comfort with being drenched on a Tuesday afternoon had reached past every careful wall she had built around herself and touched something older, something that recognized him, like earth recognizing rain. He called her the next day. Not a text, a call. His voice on the phone was the same as his voice in the rain, unhurried, warm, with that laugh sitting just underneath every sentence waiting to come out. They talked for 2 hours. She could not explain it afterwards, not the length of the conversation, nor the ease of it. She had friends she had known for a decade with whom conversation required more effort than this. With Tobina, there was no effort. There was only the strange sensation of being known, not learned, not studied, but known, as if some part of him had always carried a map of her interior and was simply now confirming what he already understood.
He knew poetry. That shocked her. Not the polished recitation of a man trying to impress a literature teacher, but genuine knowledge. The kind that comes from reading alone for pleasure. From carrying books in a single bag through Abuja and Port Harcourt and Kano, from finding company in wards when cities changed, but the words stayed the same. He quoted Okot Pitek to her on the phone without warning, and she had to sit down. They had dinner on Friday at a small restaurant in GRA that she liked for its quiet. He was already seated when she arrived, which she noticed because men who arrived first were rare in her experience. He was reading, a small paperback, and he did not look up immediately when she walked in, not because he was rude, but because he was genuinely absorbed in what he was reading, and she found that she liked it. She liked that he did not perform awareness of her. She liked that he was simply present in his own life until she entered it. He looked up. He smiled, and the restaurant felt warmer. Dinner lasted 4 hours. She learned things about him that life that most people never learn about anyone. He had grown up in Owerri, the second of 5 children, in a family where his father was a teacher and his mother sold fabric at the main market. He had won a scholarship to study engineering at University of Niger Nuksuka. He had been engaged once, 7 years ago, to a woman named Chisu, who had ended because she could not live with a man who was always leaving. He did not blame Chisu. He said this without bitterness, without performance, with the clean honesty of a man who had sat with a truth long enough to make peace with it. Adaeze watched him across the table and felt that feeling again. That unnamed thing in her chest. It felt like the moment before rain. She told herself to be careful. She was not careful. Within 3 weeks, he had become the fixed point of her days. They talked every morning. He came to her flat 3 evenings a week and sat in her sitting room while she graded papers, reading his paperback, occasionally reading passages aloud to her that he found beautiful. She cooked. He washed the dishes without being asked. He fixed the leaking tap in her bathroom that she had been meaning to call a plumber about for 6 months. He bought her hibiscus, a different soil mixture, and reported it on a Sunday afternoon, and within 2 weeks, it bloomed. She stood on her balcony looking at those red blooms and felt something close to fear. Because she recognized what was happening. She was a literature teacher. She knew every story about women who loved too quickly and too completely. She had taught those stories to teenagers for 9 years. She knew how they ended. But knowing a story and being able to stop yourself from living it are 2 entirely different things. She was living it. And it was the most alive she had felt in years. The months that followed were the best of Adaeze's adult life. She would say this later to her friend Sandra, sitting in Sandra's kitchen in Lekki with cold zobo in her hands and a different kind of knowledge in her eyes. She would say it plainly, without shame, without the careful revision that grief sometimes forces on memory. Those months were good. She would not take them back. She would not unmake them, even knowing what came after. Tobena filled her world the way rain fills a dry landscape. Completely, generously, transforming everything it touched. He remembered things. The small things. The kind of things that reveal whether a person is truly paying attention or only performing attention. He remembered that she found coriander unbearable and removed it from dishes without being reminded twice. He remembered the name of the student she had mentioned once who was struggling with comprehension and asked about that child weeks later. He remembered that her mother's birthday was in September and helped her choose a gift in August. He remembered that she liked to sit in silence for 20 minutes after she
Heavily, unmistakably, even before a single drop has fallen. She was happy, completely, quietly, in the way that settles. And then, in November, his phone rang on a Sunday morning while he was making tea in her kitchen. And she heard his voice change. Not dramatically, not a gasp or a shout, just a subtle shift. The drop in temperature, the way air changes just before weather arrives. He came back to the sitting room with the tea and set it down and sat beside her and said, "There is a project in Kano. They need me in 2 weeks." She looked at him. He looked at the tea. She said, "How long?" He said, "They are saying 6 months, maybe 8. The room was very quiet. Outside, the November harmattan had begun to thin the air and pull the moisture from everything it touched. The hibiscus on the balcony had stopped blooming. The sky was the white and empty color of a page with nothing written on it yet. She said, "Okay." He looked at her then. That look again. The one that carried everything he had not yet found the words for. He said, "I will come back, Ada." She nodded. She believed him. She should have listened more carefully to what he did not say. He did not say, "I will stay." He left on a Thursday. She drove him to the park and helped carry his single bag. And they stood beside the bus in the early morning cold of harmattan. And he held her face in both hands and looked at her for a long time. The way you look at a place you are memorizing, because some part of you suspects you will not see it the same way again. He kissed her forehead. He picked up his bag. He got on the bus. She stood and watched until the bus turned the corner and disappeared.
Then she drove home. She made tea. She sat on her balcony. She looked at the hibiscus. She was fine. She told herself she was fine. She was a woman who knew how to be alone. She had been alone contentedly for most of her adult life. 6 months was not forever. People survived distance. People had survived wars. She was fine. For the first 2 weeks, she was fine. He called every day. Long calls. Unhurried. The same warmth and the same laugh underneath every sentence. He described Kano to her. The different quality of the light there, the flat, wide sky, the architecture that carried centuries in its walls, and the suya that he said was a different species from Enugu suya. And she said that was a betrayal, and he laughed. She held her phone after those calls and felt him close enough to touch. Then the calls began to shorten. Not immediately. Gradually. The way water recedes. Slowly enough that you keep telling yourself the level is the same, that you are imagining the change, until one morning you look and the riverbed is visible. Daily calls became every other day. Every other day became twice a week. Twice a week became once. The calls that had lasted 2 hours now lasted 20 minutes. He was busy. She understood this. The project was demanding, the site had problems. He was exhausted. She heard the exhaustion, and she told herself that was all it was. But there was something else she heard underneath the exhaustion. A distance that was not geographical. A slight pulling back, like a tide going out. Subtle and impossible to name without sounding unreasonable. She did not say anything. She was not a woman who made noise about the things that frightened her. She sat with her fear the way she sat in rain. Still, watching, waiting to understand what it was really made of. January came and he did not come home for Christmas as he had loosely suggested he might. He called on Christmas morning and apologized, and she heard something in his voice that she recognized from her 9 years of teaching. The sound of a person reciting something they have rehearsed. She said it was fine. She makes pepper soup for herself and called her mother and spent the evening reading. She was not fine. February. A month passed with 4 calls, short ones. He was well. The project was progressing. He would be in touch. She found herself looking at her phone with an expression her friend Neka caught during a visit and said nothing about, but whose eyes said everything. March. 2 calls in 3 weeks. She sat with that. She counted it. She looked at the number. 2 calls in 3 weeks from a man she had spoken to every day for 7 months. She held that fact up to the light and examined it the way she examined a piece of writing for what it was truly saying underneath what it appeared to say. It was saying something has changed. It was saying he is pulling back. It was possibly saying something she was not yet ready to hear. She called him on a Wednesday night in late March. He picked up on the 5th ring, which was new. She could hear background noise, voices, movement, a different life being lived on the other side of a distance she was only beginning to understand was not just kilometers. She said to Bena, "Talk to me. What is happening?" A pause. That particular quality of silence that is not empty but full of the thing that is trying to decide whether to come out. He said, "Ada, I am tired. Can we talk tomorrow?" She said, "We have been talking tomorrow for 2 months. Another pause.
He said, "I know. I'm sorry. I need time to think." She said, "Think about what?" He did not answer immediately. And in that space between her question and his non-answer, Adaeze felt something she had felt only once before in her life. The morning her father died, standing in a hospital corridor before anyone had said a word to her. The body knows. It knows before the mind gives it permission to know. He said, "We will talk. I promise. Just give me a little time." She said, "Okay." She set her phone down. She sat in the silence of her flat. The harmattan had long since ended. The first rains of the year had just begun to arrive. She could hear them now on her zinc roof, light and exploratory. Not yet the serious rains of April and May, just a reminder that they were coming. She sat and listened to the rain and understood with a terrible clarity that she had built her happiness on water, and water does not hold its shape. He came back to Enugu in April, not because the project had ended. He came because she had finally, after 3 weeks of silence that had grown into something unbearable, sent him one message. Not an accusation, not a demand, just 5 words. "I deserve to know." He arrived on a Saturday morning. She opened the door and saw him. And the first thing she felt was not anger. It was grief. Because he looked the same. That same face, those same eyes. And it would have been easier if the man who stood at her door was visibly not the man she loved. But he was the same man. He was just standing differently. Held differently. Like a house from which the warmth has been removed. But the walls remain. She made tea. They sat. The rain outside was steady and serious. The real April rains had arrived on time, generous and uncompromising. He told her.
It came out slowly. The way things come out when a person has been carrying them too long and the weight has finally exceeded the capacity to hold. There was a woman in Kano. Her name was Halima. They had met in November, 2 weeks after he arrived. She was a project coordinator. It had not been his intention. He had not planned it. He knew that was not an excuse. He knew. Adaeze sat across from him and listened without interrupting. She was a literature teacher. She knew that every story must be heard to its end before it can be understood. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Did you love me?" He said, "Yes, Ada. Yes, I did. I do." She said, "But you love her also?" He didn't answer, which was its own answer. She nodded. She looked at her tea. She looked at the rain on the window. She said, "I want you to leave now." He said,
she said, quietly, completely steady. I want you to leave now, Tobena. Please. He left. She sat alone in her flat, and the rain came down outside with a fury and a generosity that felt almost personal. As if the sky too had things it needed to release. She did not cry immediately. She sat with it first, the way she always sat with everything, still, watching, waiting to understand what it was made of. When the tears came, they came without warning and without sound. Not the dramatic grief of films and novels, the real kind, the quiet, private, devastating kind that no one sees and that leaves no visible marks except in the places only the person themselves knows to look. She cried for a long time.
Then she washed her face. She made fresh tea. She went to her balcony. She looked at the hibiscus, still blooming, red and stubborn and completely indifferent to everything that had just happened in the flat behind it. She looked at that hibiscus for a long time. Then she went inside and opened a novel and read until she fell asleep. Grief is not a single weather event. Adaeze understood this. She taught her students this, that in literature, grief is always depicted as a storm. But the truth is that grief is more like a season. It has different days within it. Some days are violent. Some days are quiet and almost bearable. Some days arrive with sun and fool you into thinking you are through it. And then a smell, a song, a particular... And cooked with her, and watched films with her, and laughed with her. And that was exactly and precisely what was needed. Tobena called twice in May. She let both calls ring out. Not from cruelty. She was not a cruel woman. But because she had learnt somewhere in all those months of loving him that some things cannot be revisited without cost. Some doors, once gently closed, must remain closed. Not forever, but for now. For now. She began writing in June. She had not written since university. Poems she was now embarrassed by, overwrought and undergraduate. But she found herself sitting at her kitchen table one Saturday morning with coffee and the sound of rain on her roof, and her hand moving across paper before her mind had made any decision about it. She wrote about the smell before rain. She wrote about a woman who stood still at a bus stop. She wrote about love that comes all at once and completely like weather. Gives life to everything it touches. And cannot, by its nature, remain. She wrote badly at first. Then, less badly. Then one evening in July, she read something she had written and felt the particular silence of recognizing a truth. She kept writing. September came. Her mother's birthday, the one Tobena had helped her plan for in August of the previous year. She bought the gift herself this time. A wrapper her mother had admired once in a shop in Enugu. The kind that says, I see you. I have been paying attention.
She took the bus to her mother's house in Enugu's old residential quarter, and her mother opened the door and looked at her daughter's face, the way mothers look, below the surface, past the careful presentation, and said nothing about Tobina. Did not ask, did not fill the absence with words, simply took her daughter's hand and laid her inside, and sat her down and put a plate of food in front of her.
Her mother said, "The same rain that floods a compound grows the yam. You cannot curse it simply because it did not know where to stop. It is rain. It does what it is made to do. What grows from it? That is yours. That was always yours." Adaeze sat with that for a long time. She went home that evening and sat on her balcony. The hibiscus was blooming again. It had never really stopped. Red and persistent, and entirely itself. She looked at it and she felt, for the first time since April, something that was not grief. Not its opposite, exactly. Something quieter and more durable than either. Something that felt like ground, solid, hers. She had been writing for 3 months. She had a collection forming. Not intentionally, not with a plan, but the way things form when a person is paying honest attention to their own interior. She read the pieces together one evening and understood that they were a story. Her story. The story of a woman who loved weather. She sent 3 of the pieces to a literary journal in Lagos that she respected. A journal she had been reading for years and submitting to occasionally in her 20s and never succeeding with. She sent them and forgot about them. In October, she started a creative writing club at her school for students who loved words more than they could explain, who carried stories inside them that had no outlet. She met on Thursday afternoons with 12 students, ranging from 14 to 17. And she read to them, and they wrote, and she listened. And something in the room on Thursday afternoons felt like what she had been looking for, without knowing she was looking.
Tobena sent a message in October. Not a call, a message. It said, "I hope you are well, Ada. I think about you often. I am sorry. I mean that." She read it. She sat with it. She thought about what she wanted to say. She wrote back, "I am well. I am more than well. Take care of yourself, Tobena." She meant it. Both sentences. She was more than well. And she genuinely wished him no harm. He had been Rain. Rain does what it is made to do. She had grown. What grew from it was hers. The literary journal responded in November. They wanted all 3 pieces, not just one, all 3. And the editor, a woman named Dr. Funke Adeyemi, whose own writing Adaeze had admired for a decade, wrote a personal note at the bottom of the acceptance email that said, "These pieces are extraordinary. Is there more? Is this part of something larger? I would like to know." Adaeze read that email 3 times.
Then she called Sandra. Sandra screamed so loudly that Adaeze had to hold the phone away from her ear. And she laughed. A real laugh. The full kind. The kind that comes from a place below where pain lives.
And Sandra was still screaming, and Adaeze was still laughing. And outside, the November sky was doing what November skies in Enugu do, alternating between harmattan haze and unexpected brief rains. That particular season of transition when the world cannot fully decide what it is becoming. She wrote back to Dr. Funke Adeyemi and said, "Yes, there is more. It is part of something larger. I am still finding out how large." She began to understand that this writing, this Thursday afternoon club, this balcony with its stubborn red hibiscus, this flat on Independence layout that was entirely her own, this life that was quieter than the life she had imagined, but deeper, more textured, more genuinely hers. This was what the rain had left behind. Not the rain itself. You cannot keep rain. Rain is not made to be kept. But what the rain grew, that was permanent. That was real. That was hers. In a way that no person, no departure, no silence, no leaving could reach. The collection was published the following year. It was called The Smell Before Rain. 12 pieces. Half poetry, half prose. A form that resisted category the way Adaeze herself had always resisted being easily placed. Dr. Funke Adeyemi wrote the foreword. The cover was designed by a young artist from Calabar who captured something in shades of deep blue and red that made Adaeze sit down when she first saw it. A woman standing in rain, face upturned, eyes closed, not running. The book was reviewed in 4 publications. 1.
Review called it the most honest account of love and loss published by a Nigerian writer this decade. Another said, Adaeze writes about grief the way the earth absorbs rain, completely, transformingly, until you cannot tell where the grief ends and the growth begins. She read that second review, standing in her kitchen with morning coffee, and had to set the cup down. She was invited to speak at a literary festival in Lagos. She took the stage in a wrapper of deep blue and gold, her mother's color, her color now, and spoke about rain. Her students read the book. They wrote her notes that she kept in a folder in her desk drawer, handwritten, unpolished, true. One girl named Chidinma, who had barely spoken in the first month of writing club, wrote, "Miss Adaeze, this book made me feel like my pain was not a mistake, like it was growing something. I did not know pain could grow something." Adaeze read that note and held it for a long time. She was 33 years old. She lived alone on Independence layout. Her hibiscus bloomed continuously now, red and extravagant. She still stood still in rain when it came. She still listened to it on her zinc roof. She still knew, before anyone else in any room, the smell that came before it. But now, she also knew something else. Something she had not known before Tobena. Not fully. Not in her body. She knew what she was made of. She was made of the kind of thing that rain cannot wash away. The deep-rooted, earth-holding, rain-drinking, light-seeking kind.
The kind that grows most fiercely in the aftermath of the hardest weather. She was not a woman who had loved and lost. She was a woman who had loved and learned, who had stood in rain and been changed by it, who had let it pass through her the way rain passes through everything.
Not destroying, but rearranging. Not taking, but revealing. She walked home from the Lagos Literary Festival to her hotel on a night when the city smelled of something she recognized immediately. She stopped walking. She lifted her face. She closed her eyes. She smiled. There is a smell that comes before rain. Adaeze knew it the first time she ever breathed. She would know it until the last breath she ever took. It was the smell of what was coming. Not a threat. Not a warning. A promise. The world reminding itself that it was still alive. That water still moved through it. That dry seasons end. That things grow. She stood on the street in Lagos with her face tilted upward and the first drops touching her skin, and she did not run. She never ran. She stood still and let it fall and let it pass and felt underneath everything, underneath the grief that had remade her and the love that had grown her and the writing that had named her, that particular fullness of a woman who has been through water and come out knowing herself. Tobena was somewhere, Kano or elsewhere. Living the life that rain lives, moving, falling, giving, moving on. She wished him no harm. She held no debt against him. He had come into her life the way rain comes, without permission, without apology, with a generosity that could not be sustained. He had not known how to stay, but he had left something behind. He had left the smell, the memory of standing still, the knowledge that love, even love that cannot remain, changes the landscape permanently. That you are never the same earth after rain has moved through you. That this is not a wound. This is how things grow. She had written a book. She had built a room where young people learned that their stories mattered. She had her hibiscus, her balcony, her flat on Independence layout, her mother's blue and gold, her Sandra who screamed joy down the phone, her Nika who watched carefully with steady eyes, her Thursday afternoons with 12 young people who were learning slowly that pain can be the most fertile soil there is. She had herself completely, without apology, without division. The rain came down on Lagos fully now, generous, serious, the kind that means it, and the street around her filled with people running for shelter, cursing the sky, holding bags above their heads. Adaeze stood still. She breathed in. she let the rain fall. And she was not afraid. The end. If this story reached something inside of you, if Adaeze's journey felt like something you have carried yourself or something you needed to hear, then this channel was made for you. We tell the stories that matter, the stories about women who stood in storms and came out knowing themselves, the stories about love that teaches even when it leaves, the stories that remind you that what grows in your aftermath belongs entirely to you. Please like this video right now, not for the numbers, for the stories. Every like tells us that these stories need to keep being told. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so that every time a new story arrives, you are the first to receive it. We release new stories every week.
Stories about strength. Stories about love. Stories about the women who refused to be washed away. Share this story with one person in your life who has loved something that could not stay. With one person who is in the middle of their dry season and needs to know that rain leaves things behind. With one person who has been standing still in a storm and needs to know that standing still is not weakness. It is the deepest kind of strength. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever loved someone who felt like rain? Someone who gave you life but could not remain? Someone whose leaving grew something in you that their staying never could have? We want to hear your story. Because your story matters. Because every woman who has ever stood in rain and refused to run deserves to know she is not alone. Like, subscribe, share, comment. We will be here every week with another story worth staying for. God bless you, and thank you for watching. Gracious Folktales.